Welcome back to Tom's Story. Let's jump right into today's narrative. They often say your marriage day is supposed to be the happiest moment of your life. Mine. It was a complete disaster, an utter catastrophe. I encountered Sarah about 3 years prior. She was captivating, intelligent, and possessed this contagious chuckle that could melt even the most cynical hearts. From our first meeting, I was captivated. We experienced our share of challenges, as all couples do, but by the time I proposed, I believed we had weathered every possible difficulty. Turns out, I couldn't have been more mistaken. The trouble began a week before the ceremony. I was at my friend Ben's apartment, relaxing after a tiring day. Ben is the type of person who is brutally honest, sometimes to a fault, but fiercely loyal. Over a beer, he hesitated before speaking. "James," he began, "there's something I think you need to be aware of." That sentence is never followed by good news. "What's wrong?" I inquired, setting down my drink. He scratched his neck, avoiding my gaze. "Are you certain about Sarah, man?" I frowned, confused. "What do you mean, certain?" "Okay, don't get mad at me," he paused, searching for the right words. "I saw Sarah last Friday at Tony's bar. She wasn't alone." I chuckled, more from disbelief than amusement. "Ben, come on, she was probably just out with her girlfriends." "Yeah, that's what I initially assumed too, until I witnessed her kissing some dude. And not a friendly peck, James. A passionate, earth-shattering kiss." I didn't believe him, not initially. I convinced myself Ben must have been mistaken, that maybe Sarah had a doppelganger in town. But a nagging feeling in my stomach wouldn't subside. I couldn't shake this unease, so I went home, attempting to dismiss it, yet failing. That night, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. Ben's words echoed in my mind. She wasn't alone, kissing some dude, a passionate, earth-shattering kiss. It made no sense. Sarah and I were happy, or so I thought. But what if Ben wasn't wrong? What if the woman I was about to marry wasn't the person I believed her to be? The following morning, I resolved to pay closer attention. Subtle details began to emerge. The way she angled her phone screen away from my view, the occasional late-night messages she attributed to work, the slight strain in her voice when I inquired about her plans. Once, while she was showering, I picked up her phone, my hands trembling as I scrolled through her messages. But there was nothing suspicious, no questionable texts or calls from unknown contacts. It was all too perfect, almost suspiciously so. The feeling that something was amiss persisted. So, the next time Sarah mentioned going out, I decided to follow her. For the next few days, she stayed in. However, 2 days before the wedding, Sarah dressed up more elaborately than usual. She chose a form-fitting dress and heels, her makeup impeccable. Twirling in front of the mirror, she seemed pleased with her reflection. "Tomorrow's the day," she announced, referencing the tradition where the groom shouldn't see the bride the day before the wedding. "I'll be staying at Jessica's place tonight. I'm heading out with Jessica and some of the girls," she said, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. "We're finalizing some wedding details and then maybe getting dinner after. I'll go to Jessica's afterward." "Okay," I mumbled, my mind already racing, following the trail of suspicion. As soon as she left, I grabbed my coat, determined to uncover the truth. I followed her in my car, maintaining a safe distance. She navigated through the city, winding through streets, eventually pulling over in a quiet residential area. My heart pounded as I watched her park, get out, and stand by the curb as if expecting someone. I waited, barely breathing, observing her every move. Then, he appeared. He approached her, his demeanor relaxed and assured. He was taller, in a dark coat, and unfamiliar to me. He greeted her with a smile, and instantly, they were kissing passionately, their lips locked together with an intensity that made my stomach churn. My world seemed to shatter in that instant. Sarah, the woman I was about to marry, kissing another man like it was commonplace. I couldn't let it slide. My hand trembling, I quickly grabbed my phone and snapped some photos. The flash was subdued, concealed in the darkness of my car, but the images were clear, her lips on his, her eyes closed in passion. I felt sick, yet I continued taking pictures, proof that I wasn't hallucinating. They broke apart, exchanged a few words, and got into her car. They drove off, and I immediately started my car, tailing them. I followed them for miles, my mind a whirlwind of disbelief, until they finally pulled into a motel parking lot. The building was discreet, tucked away on a side street, not luxurious, but certainly not a place for a casual hangout. They exited the car, and I remained hidden behind a row of parked vehicles, watching them head towards the entrance. My stomach twisted as I again took out my phone, snapping more pictures of them walking towards the motel entrance. Sarah's hand was tucked in his, the way they leaned into each other as if they were the only people on earth. I couldn't just let it go. With my heart pounding, I parked further down the street and followed them into the motel. At the front desk, the receptionist greeted me, and I inhaled deeply before asking, "Could you tell me what room Sarah Collins is in?" The receptionist frowned, glancing at his computer. "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have a reservation under that name." My stomach lurched, but I maintained composure. "I mean, the woman who just entered, moments ago, with a man. Which room are they in?" The receptionist's eyes darted nervously. "I'm afraid I cannot provide that information, sir." I leaned forward, lowering my voice, trying to remain calm. "Look, I am about to marry that woman, and I just saw her walk in here with another man. I need to know their room number." The receptionist hesitated, glancing around the lobby, ensuring no one was listening. I can't, it's against policy to disclose guest details," he said, clearly uncomfortable. I took a deep breath, frustration rising. "Please, I'm not here to cause trouble. Just tell me the room number. I need to know." The receptionist sighed, glanced over his shoulder, then leaned in slightly. "Room 312. But please, don't make a scene." I nodded quickly, forcing a tight smile, and walked away before he could change his mind. I made my way to the third floor, my mind racing. I stood outside their door, room 312, ear pressed against the wood. Muffled laughter and voices drifted through the walls. I could hear the man's deep chuckle, Sarah's voice chiming in softly. The sound twisted something deep inside me, yet I remained still, absorbing every moment. They were so relaxed, as if I didn't exist. I couldn't just leave now. I needed to hear more, needed to understand what was happening between them. I quickly glanced down the hall, then back at the door. Without hesitation, I returned to the front desk and booked the room next to theirs, room 311. I couldn't bear the thought of merely standing outside their door, so close yet so far from the truth. Upon returning, I slipped into the new room quietly. I leaned against the wall by the door, waiting for the sounds to resume. Through the thin walls, I could still hear the laughter, muffled but distinct. I held my breath, attempting to make sense of the chaos in my mind. I didn't want this knowledge, shouldn't even be here, but I couldn't stop myself. I cautiously opened the balcony door of my room to step outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of them through their balcony's open sliding door. As soon as I stepped onto my balcony, I froze. I heard the unmistakable sound of their balcony door sliding open. I rushed back inside, heart pounding, pressing myself against the wall as quietly as possible. I didn't want them to see me, didn't want to be discovered. Through the thin wall between our balconies, I could hear them laughing again, then footsteps as they both stepped onto their balcony. They stood there for a while, talking softly, too distant for me to hear their words, but close enough for me to feel the weight of their presence. It felt like forever before they went back inside, and I finally exhaled the breath I'd been holding. I couldn't endure it any longer. I needed definitive proof. I looked at the balcony divider separating our rooms. The gap wasn't wide enough to deter me. My heart still raced, but I forced myself to move, inching along the edge of my balcony. I jumped lightly, landing on their balcony with barely a sound. Slowly, I approached their sliding door, my hands trembling. I reached out and pushed it just slightly, enough to peek inside. Through the opening, in the dim room light, I saw them entangled in the sheets. They were kissing intensely, desperate kisses. Their clothing began to fall away, piece by piece, and a knot tightened in my chest. My whole world spun as I witnessed the scene unfold. I didn't want to do this, didn't want to see it, but I was unable to look away. In a panic, I pulled out my phone, trying to remain as silent as possible, not making a sound. My breath hitched as I started recording, standing just behind the curtains, watching them, oblivious to my presence. Every second felt like an eternity. I continued recording them for about a minute, feeling both sick and numb, unsure of my next move. Finally, I stepped back as quietly as possible, carefully jumping back onto my own balcony, my legs weak beneath me. I stood there for a moment, heart still pounding, trying to process everything I had just witnessed. I couldn't believe what was happening. Sarah, the woman I was about to marry, was unfaithful, just 2 days before our wedding. The betrayal struck me like a physical blow, and I was paralyzed, unable to grasp the enormity of what I had seen. She had been the one I trusted, the one I had planned my life with, and yet here she was, intimately involved with another man. I drove back home, the weight of my discovery pressing down on me. Tonight, I knew she would be at Jessica's, but as I sat in the silence of our home, all I could think about was how to inflict upon her the pain I was experiencing. The anger within me burned, and the thought of her walking down the aisle in 2 days, feigning perfection, made my blood boil. I needed to regain control. I needed to expose everything she had done, everything she thought she could conceal from me. I craved revenge, and I was going to have it. The wedding day arrived. As the guests began to gather at the venue, the anticipation was palpable. Sarah was present, along with other guests, chatting and enjoying the atmosphere. The room gradually quieted as everyone took their seats, awaiting the ceremony. As the guests settled, I stood up. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice cutting through the room, clear and steady. "Before we begin the ceremony, I'd like to share something with you all." All eyes turned to me, and for a moment, the entire room fell silent. The atmosphere shifted, curiosity hanging in the air. I took a deep breath, knowing exactly what I was about to do. "I know you've all been looking forward to this ceremony, but before we proceed, I want to show you some of the best moments Sarah and I have shared," I continued, my voice surprisingly composed, considering the turmoil inside me. "Our trips, our laughter, our love, all of it." A few people smiled, assuming I was about to share something sweet and sentimental. The projector behind me flickered to life, and the first photos appeared on the screen. Sarah and I were smiling, embracing, laughing together on various trips, images of what seemed like a perfect couple. For a fleeting moment, I almost felt a pang of guilt, but the feeling quickly vanished. Slowly, the photos transitioned. The next image appeared, and there she was, Sarah, kissing another man. The room fell into stunned silence. Whispers began to ripple through the guests. People exchanged confused glances, unsure of what they were seeing. Some looked at Sarah, their faces in disbelief. Sarah's face paled, her hand flew to her mouth as she gasped. Her eyes darted between the screen and me, a look of utter panic flashing across her face. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Then, without warning, the screen changed again. The video began playing, Sarah and the man in the motel room, oblivious to my presence. The video showed them in bed, kissing, undressing. My stomach churned as I heard the sounds of their intimacy, sounds I had never imagined hearing on the day I was supposed to marry her. The entire room became deathly silent, then gasps erupted. Guests began whispering, some standing up in shock, others pointing, some too stunned to even react. The atmosphere transformed from confusion to outrage. I heard muttering voices, accusing glances. "What is this?" someone shouted. "Is this real?" "This is insane," another voice exclaimed. Sarah's face turned ashen as she stood frozen, realizing the unfolding reality. The color drained from her face, her hands trembling. The man she had been with, the one I had never known, was nowhere to be seen, but her betrayal was exposed for everyone to witness. The truth hung in the air, thick as a storm cloud, suffocating everyone present. "James, what is this?" Sarah finally stammered, her voice barely audible. "What are you doing?" "You've been caught, Sarah," I stated, my voice cutting through the chaos. I'm done. The wedding is off. You've shown me exactly who you are, and I won't pretend any longer. She began to shake her head, but the damage was irreversible. The room erupted into chaos, arguments, people shouting at Sarah, at me. Some were furious with her, others in disbelief, but all I could do was stand there, feeling numb. This was the moment I had anticipated. The truth was revealed, and now, nothing would ever be the same. Sarah stood there trembling as the room descended into pandemonium. Her eyes were wide with shock, but no sympathy remained within me. She had betrayed me, and no amount of explanation could undo that. James, please, let me explain, she pleaded, her voice breaking, but I could no longer listen. The damage was done. The guests were divided, some enraged with her, others still reeling from shock, but it was inconsequential. The woman I had loved, the woman I was about to marry, was not the person I had believed her to be. I turned away, no longer wanting to see her. The wedding, intended to be the happiest day of our lives, had become a nightmare. She was not the future I had envisioned. Without uttering another word, Sarah turned and fled. People attempted to console her, but I remained still. There was no turning back.